So Thoburn crosses at 3. They're all across by 4, and then there's about a lull of about an hour. So about 5 o'clock is really when the fighting on July 18th begins. So a lot of people sometimes don't realize this. They think all battles start in the morning. This is an evening and night battle, okay? And so about 5 o'clock, Gabriel Wharton's division launches an attack against the troops of George Welles's command. And so that is happening right on the opposite shore of the river. Now, as I always tell people, Gabriel Wharton's attack is not the main assault. It's not the main attraction, but rather the main distraction. Because what is happening is Robert Rhodes' division is moving to the north. And what he wants to do is he wants to get on the far northern flank of the Federal Army and basically roll up their line from north to south. So as Wharton's attack begins, it's just at that moment that General Ricketts' division starts coming off the mountain and across this property. So for those of you who don't know, for many, many decades, this was a golf course. This pond that is here is a man-made pond. It took out the historic road, Parker's Ford Road. So the road that runs to the left of that house, that's the old vestige of Parker's Ford Road, but it cut right through here, and where that cut is in the tall grass, you know, you can kind of imagine the road going through the pond right here. So if you're standing here, you know, 5 o'clock on July the 18th, you're going to see those 5,000 to 6,000 men from General Ricketts' division coming right across this landscape, heading toward Island Ford. To Confederates on the opposite shore, this was an imposing and concerning sight to them. So today, the landscape has grown up. It is not as heavily wooded there along the riverbanks and certainly in the mountains. So Confederates could see Ricketts' division coming down. And Ricketts' division, you could see those regimental flags. The guys on the other side had a healthy respect for those troops from the 6th Corps. So a chaplain in Early's army, Chaplain James Sheeran, 9th Louisiana Infantry, this is what he wrote about how freaked out he and his comrades were as they saw Ricketts' men coming down this road. The 6th Yankee Corps is concentrated in front of us. Their appearance as they file along the mountainside is splendid indeed. Their lines are well formed, their men well dressed, and their numerous battle flags waving with seeming triumph. They present a grand and formidable experience as they move in solid column to the bank of the Shenandoah. Well, for people like Gabriel Wharton, who can also see this, this is kind of a freak out moment. So we've got to figure out, if we're on that side and we're part of Wharton's division, how do we slow this down or stop it? Well, it just so happens that just behind Wharton's division, so basically directly opposite of us on a rise of high ground about 75, 80 yards from the river's edge, are two 20-pound Parrott rifles. Not 10-pound Parrott rifles, 20-pound Parrott rifles that are part of Captain George Chapman's battery. So Chapman's task is to lob shells here, where we're standing, to make Ricketts turn around and go that way. Now, one of the things that Confederate artillery was not at the Battle of Cool Spring was good. Shells were landing oftentimes overshooting Federal positions, we'll talk more about that, or they were landing well short, and we'll talk about that as well. Now, as Ricketts' men are coming under fire, as they're being targeted by Chapman, there is something that happens that makes Ricketts decide that he's not going to cross. And it has nothing to do with Chapman's battery on the opposite shore, but it has everything to do with what he sees happening off to our right. So again, you have to imagine that during the war, none of these trees are here. This is actually wheat fields in 1864. So if you're standing here and you're looking off in that direction, you can see a quarter mile, half a mile to my right, you can see Federal soldiers from Colonel Samuel Young's command going that way. You can also see a little bit closer maybe about a 1/10 of a mile to my right. Troops from Colonel Daniel Frost's brigade retreating and heading in this direction. So what he is seeing is, first with Young's command, the residue of being improperly trained. So Samuel Young commanded a group of dismounted cavalry, guys from 27 different cavalry regiments. And when I say dismounted, I don't mean they're not just fighting without a horse. They're also fighting without the arms that they were trained to shoot. So when you get to the summer of 1864, you have these guys who have lost their horses are brought to the vicinity of Washington, D.C., and they are told until they can get a new horse, they have to trade in their carbine, breech loaders like a Sharps or a Smith or whatever the case might be, and they're given a musket. And then they are put together into this hodgepodge unit, so they have no opportunity to really drill, no opportunity to establish esprit de corps, and now they're told, okay, you have to go and hold the far northern flank of the Union Army and confront one of the best divisions in the Army of Northern Virginia, in Robert Rhodes. So by most accounts, guys fire a volley or two, and then they flee to this side of the river. Now, you might be thinking that, well, if they're doing that, they're cowards. But I would argue that they are doing it because some of these guys don't have anything left to shoot. There are numerous accounts from Young's command where they load the musket and they leave the ramrod in and they shoot it and it's gone. So if you don't have your ramrod, you can't reload. There are other accounts of guys, you know, laying it on the ground, leaning up against a wall or a tree or something like that, and then they move and they're like, oh crap, I forgot my ramrod. And so really it is poor training. It's that lack of having done it a lot that puts those 1,000 men in Young's command in a bad situation. So basically 20% of Thoburn's command, it's gone within a matter of 20 minutes. Daniel Frost's brigade, much of those guys are going to retreat as well, because Daniel Frost is going to take his brigade and wheel it to the north to present a front to Robert Rhodes. And it's in the course of that Daniel Frost is shot through the bowels, mortally wounded. Pandemonium breaks out in his brigade, and most of his men retreat. So Thoburn, you know, he's fighting this battle. By 6 p.m., an hour into it, he basically has lost half of his command. So Ricketts looks at those guys and he says, we are not going over there because I don't think there's anything that can be gained by going over there. I think it's a suicide mission. So there's an argument that breaks out. Like Ricketts and George Crook are down here in this area and they're fighting with each other because Crook says, well, Horatio Wright promised you're going to go. And Ricketts is like, I'm not going. And then Crook goes back up to the gap. And here's where Horatio Wright, I think, makes a major mistake. And he condemns those guys from Thoburn's command who are still over there. He says, basically, upon further review, I think Ricketts is right. I don't think there's anything to be gained by sending his men to the opposite shore of the Shenandoah. Ricketts, however, is going to send one reinforcement. And that reinforcement is going to be the artillery from Colonel Charles Tompkins's artillery brigade. So we've already talked about Weir's battery and what they did. There are going to be 3 other batteries that are going to support Thoburn. And they are supporting him, I want to stress this, they are supporting him not to win the battle. They are supporting him to survive the battle. Because ultimately, the measure of success is not going to be defeating early, but it's going to be holding on until the sun goes down. And sunset on July 18th, 1864, I looked it up, is 7:39 p.m. There is no daylight savings time. All right, so 7:39 p.m. is sunset. So the goal is to hang on for another hour and a half, 2 hours, until it gets, as my dad would say, dark, dark. And then to get them to this side of the river to safety. So what's going to happen is Weir's battery is going to move from closer to Castleman's Ferry to basically the heights above the house. Battery E, 1st West Virginia Light Artillery, which was part of Thoburn's command. They initially were set up on the terrace in front of that house. They are going to go back up Parker's Ford Road, and then they are going to go in that direction several hundred yards. Then there is going to be 2 Rhode Island batteries. Battery C, First Rhode Island, will be sent all the way in that direction in the mountains for about half a mile. And then Battery G, which we're going to spend some time with, is basically going to take position in the mountains right there. And we're going to get a little bit closer to where Battery G was without scaling the heights and giving you all heart attacks. Questions? All right, so let me get out here.